A scam text drained my grandpa's retirement fund and put him in a hospice, so I found the scammer's real identity and destroyed him. After both of my parents suddenly passed in a boating accident when I was just 8 years old, CPS branded me as an orphan. And after what felt like a lifetime of begging, we only found one person willing to take me in. It wasn't any of my family's friends, none of my teachers, not even my aunts and uncles. It was my grandfather. We weren't super close prior, but it turned out that living with him was the best thing that could have happened to me. He was the type of person to warm up the car for you on cold mornings without asking, to make your favorite meal after a bad day without needing to ask what happened. He was the type of man to read the newspaper out loud so the room didn't feel so quiet, but he was also stone cold too, so much so that I fully believed my parents' death didn't even upset him. He would comfort me all while acting completely unaffected. As I grew into my teenage years and started high school, he was always there to support me, even when I started getting bullied. This group of kids would kick me into lockers, throw eggs at me as I walked home, and when I told my grandpa, I expected him to tell my teachers, but instead, he baked me brownies and told me to leave them on top of my locker during lunch. I had no idea what he meant, but I trusted him, so I did. And lo and behold, during gymnastics and PE after lunch, a brown river started leaking from their trouser pants, because my grandpa had put laxatives in the brownies and knew they wouldn't be able to resist stealing at least one each. That day I laughed so hard my organs felt like they were going to jump out of my body, and I never doubted him again, until I got home one day in 12th grade, when I got home and saw an eviction notice in the post. I brought it to my grandpa, and a wave of sadness instantly washed over him. I don't know what happened. One day, the IRS was contacting me. Next thing I know, all my savings are gone. Everything I've ever worked for, and the bank won't do anything. I felt tears sting my eyes. I couldn't believe my granddad had kept this from me for so long. I grabbed his phone and asked him to show me the text. "You owe $7,200 in unpaid taxes. Pay now or police being arrest you today." He said he put in his details, and the IRS had taken everything. I didn't have the heart to tell him it was a scam text, so I let him believe it truly was just a technological error. I gave him a hug and told him we'd figure it out as he cried into my arms. But inside, a storm was brewing. I could feel my pulse in every inch of my body. My face was red hot. The worst part? He didn't even seem sad about the money. He just seemed worried about me. He must have said sorry about 200 times before I finally convinced him that I wasn't upset. But that day, something shifted. Over the next week, as we tried to figure out what to do, my grandpa had changed. There was a constant dullness in his eyes. His hands were constantly trembling and I could see him shaking. And under the condition that I would pay her back, my aunt finally agreed to pay for a hospice. Driving him there broke my heart, but I knew it was the best thing for him, until I got my hands on that filthy scammer. Because one thing about trauma, it makes you intelligent, resourceful, crafty, and I was going to give all that I got into making sure that scammer paid the price for what he did. I started researching everything I could about IRS scams. I joined online forums where people shared similar experiences. I learned that most of these swindlers operate overseas, but they usually have local associates who collect the cash. I looked through all of Grandpa's bank statements and found where the funds had gone. A wire transfer to someone named Michael Peterson, with an address just 2 towns over. This was my first real lead. I created a new email address and pretended to be an elderly man named Gerald, who had just received the same IRS scam text. I wrote to the bank where the wire transfer had gone, saying I was confused about how to make the payment and asking for help. 3 days later, I got a response from tax agent Johnson, giving me instructions on how to wire money to the same account Grandpa had used. Now I was getting somewhere. I set up a fake Facebook profile for Gerald Thompson, complete with stock photos of an elderly man gardening and posts about grandkids and retirement. I spent hours making it look legit, with posts dating back months. Then I started commenting on public posts about taxes, making sure to sound confused and vulnerable. Within a week, Gerald got a friend request from someone named Mike Peters, obviously a fake name, but probably our Michael Peterson. We started chatting, and he was very helpful about my tax problems. Too helpful. He even offered to meet me in person to help sort everything out if I brought a cash payment. This was it, my chance. We arranged to meet at a cafe downtown, neutral territory with plenty of witnesses. I told him I'd be wearing a blue baseball cap so he could recognize me. He said he'd be in a red jacket. The day before our meeting, I almost chickened out. What was I thinking? This guy could be dangerous. But then I visited Grandpa at Sunny Pines, and he didn't even recognize me at first. When he finally did, he started crying and apologizing again for losing our house. That hardened my resolve. I didn't have a solid plan yet. Part of me wanted to confront him, record the conversation, and take it to the authorities. Another part wanted to scam him back somehow. I'm not sure what I was thinking, really. I just knew I needed to see this person face to face. So here I am now, positioned in this cafe, pretending to do homework while I wait. I've been here an hour early, watching the door. I'm not wearing a blue cap, obviously. I want to see him before he sees Gerald. I've got my phone recording in my pocket and a backup recorder in my backpack. My palms are sweaty, and I've barely touched the beverage I ordered nearly 40 minutes ago. Each time the door opens, my heart skips a beat. A guy in a red jacket just walked in. He looks normal, maybe 30, clean cut, nervous. He's scanning the room, probably looking for an old man in a blue cap. My heart is pounding so hard I can feel it in my teeth. This is the person who destroyed my grandfather's life with a single text message. The same grandfather who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up all night when I had the flu, who never once complained about having to raise a child when he should have been enjoying his retirement. He's ordering a drink now. In a few minutes, he'll realize Gerald isn't coming. He'll probably leave. This is my only chance. I need to decide right now what I'm going to do. Follow him? Confront him? Call the authorities? Whatever I do next will change everything, and there's no going back. I close my laptop and take a deep breath. For Grandpa Frank, I'm ready to risk it all. Taking a deep breath, I stand up from my table. My legs feel wobbly, like I'm walking on jello as I approach the counter where Red Jacket Guy is stirring sugar into his drink. I position myself right next to him, pretending to reach for napkins. Waiting for someone? I ask casually, not making eye contact. He glances at me, then back to the door. Yeah, older gentleman. Supposed to meet me about some tax issues. My stomach twists into knots. This is definitely our guy. I grab a few napkins and head back to my table, heart hammering in my chest. I sit down and pretend to work on my laptop while actually watching him check his phone every 30 seconds. After about 15 minutes, he looks increasingly annoyed. He calls someone, speaking in a low voice I can't quite hear from my spot. Another 10 minutes pass before he gulps down the rest of his his drink and heads for the door. I grab my backpack and follow him, keeping a good distance between us. Outside, he heads toward the parking lot behind the cafe. I trail him, trying to look casual while also not losing sight of him. He stops at a black Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper. I quickly snap a picture of his license plate before he pulls out. Following a car on foot is impossible, so I rush to my bike locked up nearby. I'm not exactly James Bond here, but I figure I can at least see which direction he goes. To my surprise, he doesn't go far, just to a strip mall about half a mile away. I watch from across the street as he enters a small office with a sign reading MP Financial Services. MP Michael Peterson. This guy isn't even trying to hide. I bike over to the strip mall and lock up my bike, then walk past his office, trying to peek inside without being obvious. Through the window, I can see him at a desk, talking on the phone. There's another desk in the office, but it looks empty. The whole setup seems sketchy. Bare walls, minimal furniture, nothing that screams legitimate business. I hang around for about an hour, pretending to window shop at the dollar store next door. Around 5:30, he locks up the office and heads back to his car. This time, I don't follow him. I've got what I need for now. His workplace, his car details, and confirmation that he's involved in the scam. The next morning, I skip school. I know it's a bad idea with graduation just weeks away, but this feels more important. I return to the strip mall early and watch from the parking lot as Michael arrives around 9:15. Once he's inside, I wait about 20 minutes before walking up to his office door. The sign says, "Walk-ins welcome," so I take a deep breath and go inside. He looks up from his computer, surprised. "Can I help you?" "Hi," I say, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for some financial advice. My grandfather recently passed away and left me some money. I'm not sure what to do with it." It's a lie, obviously, but one I figured would get his attention. His eyes light up slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss," he says, not sounding sorry at all. "Please, have a seat. I'm Mike." I sit down across from him, taking in every detail of his office. There are no certifications on the wall, no professional photos, just a generic invest in your future poster that looks like it came from a dollar store. My grandfather lost everything to this guy? "I'm Alex," I lie. "My grandpa left me about $20,000, and I don't want to just put it in a savings account. I want it to grow." Mike nods enthusiastically. "Smart thinking. Young person like you should be investing early. What's your current employment situation?" I make up a story about working part-time while finishing community college. As I talk, I notice him studying me. I wonder if he can tell how much I hate him right now. I keep my expression neutral. "I could definitely help you set up some investments," he says finally. "There are some great opportunities right now with guaranteed returns of 15% or more." Guaranteed returns of 15%? Even I know that's suspicious. No legitimate financial advisor promises guaranteed high returns. "That sounds great," I say. "How does that work exactly?" For the next 20 minutes, he explains some complicated investment scheme that makes absolutely no sense. It's all buzzwords and vague promises. He never mentions any specific stocks or funds, just exclusive investment opportunities and off-market deals. "So when can I bring in the money?" I ask, trying to sound eager. "Cash would be best," he says smoothly. "Avoids a lot of unnecessary paperwork and fees." Of course, I bet it does. "I'll need to go to the bank," I tell him. "Could I come back tomorrow? Same time?" He nods, looking pleased. "That works. Just ask for Mike when you come in." As I leave his office, my hands are shaking. This guy is running the most obvious scam operation I've ever seen, and people like my grandfather are falling for it. I want to scream. Instead, I bike straight to the police station. I tell the officer at the front desk that I want to report a scam. She directs me to a detective named Detective Collins, who handles fraud cases. I tell her everything, about Grandpa's scam, about following Mike to his office, about my conversation with him just now. Detective Collins listens carefully, taking notes. When I finish, she sighs. "I appreciate you bringing this to us, but honestly, these cases are really difficult to prosecute." "But I have proof," I argue. "I have the text message, the bank statements showing the transfer. The problem is proving intent," she explains. "He could claim he truly believed he was offering legitimate financial services. Plus, your grandfather voluntarily transferred the money. Legally, that's tricky. I can't believe what I'm hearing." "So he just gets away with it? With stealing my grandfather's life savings?" Detective Collins gives me a sympathetic look. "I'll file a report, and we can look into this Michael Peterson. If there are multiple complaints, that strengthens the case. But I need to be honest. These investigations can take months, even years." I leave the police station feeling defeated. Months or years? Grandpa doesn't have that kind of time. The scam has already destroyed his health and confidence. By the time the authorities do anything, it will be too late to matter to him. That night, I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Mike stationed in his fake office, probably counting his money and planning his next victim. I think about Grandpa Frank in his tiny room at Sunny Pines, asking me every visit when we can go home. I think about all the other elderly people out there being targeted by swindlers like Mike. The next morning, I make a decision. If the legal system won't help us, I'll have to find another way. I create a new email account under the name Gerald Thompson and write to Mike, explaining that I can't make our appointment because I'm not feeling well, but I'm very interested in his investment opportunity. I ask if we can communicate by email for now. Mike responds within an hour, obviously eager not to lose a potential victim. He sends me details about the investment opportunity, all vague promises and buzzwords. I save everything. Over the next few days, I create 3 more fake identities, all elderly people with money to invest. I set up different email accounts for each one and start corresponding with Mike. Each time, he sends the same basic pitch with slight variations. Each time, he emphasizes the need for cash payments and quick decisions. I also start researching Mike more thoroughly. A deep Google search reveals that Michael Peterson has operated under at least 2 other business names in the past 3 years. There are a few complaints on the Better Business Bureau website, but nothing that seems to have led to any consequences for him. One night, while scrolling through Facebook, I see a post in a local community group from a woman named Elaine complaining about losing money to a financial advisor. I message her immediately, and sure enough, it was Mike. We talk on the phone, and she tells me she lost $12,000 to his investment opportunity. She filed a police report too, but nothing came of it. The authorities said it was my word against his, she explains, sounding defeated. He had paperwork I signed, made it look like I knew it was a high-risk investment. I tell Elaine about my grandfather and my plan to gather evidence against Mike. She's hesitant at first, but agrees to help. Over the next week, I connect with 2 more victims. Thomas, who lost $5,000, and Jessica, who lost her entire retirement fund of $30,000. We create a small group chat to share information and coordinate our efforts. Meanwhile, I keep all my fake personas in contact with Mike. Gerald is almost ready to invest, but keeps having health issues that prevent meeting in person. Margaret is very interested but concerned about the lack of paperwork. Harold is ready to invest immediately, but needs more details about returns. Playing multiple characters is exhausting, but it's working. Mike is becoming increasingly personal in his emails, sharing details about his life to build trust. He mentions his apartment complex, his favorite restaurant, even his girlfriend's name. Each detail is another piece of the puzzle. Jessica from our victim group turns out to be incredibly helpful. She works as a paralegal and knows how to do background checks. She discovers that Mike's real name is Michael Peterson, with an E, not an O, and he has a history of small-time fraud charges in another state. Nothing big enough to get serious jail time, she tells us in our group chat, just enough to show a pattern. Thomas contributes by driving past Mike's office at different times, noting when he comes and goes. Elaine, who turns out to be quite tech-savvy for someone in her 70s, helps me set up recordings and organize our evidence. While all this is happening, I visit Grandpa Frank every other day. His condition is deteriorating rapidly. Sometimes he recognizes me immediately. Other times it takes a few minutes. The nurses tell me he's not eating much. When I ask him about it, he just shrugs. What's the point? He says, staring out the window. Everything I worked for is gone. That weekend, I bring my laptop to Sunny Pines and show Grandpa pictures of my graduation gown fitting. Graduation is just 2 weeks away, and despite everything, I'm still set to finish his class salutatorian. As we look at the photos, Grandpa suddenly grabs my hand. I'm sorry I won't be able to help with college, he whispers, his eyes filling with tears. I had funds set aside for you. It was supposed to be your education account. My heart breaks all over again. I had no idea he'd been saving for my education all these years. The money that Swindler stole wasn't just Grandpa's retirement, it was my future too. Don't worry about that, I tell him, squeezing his hand. I got scholarships, remember? And I can work part-time. But inside, I'm seething. This gives me the final push I need to execute my plan. The next day, I meet with our little anti-scam group at Elaine's house. We spread out all our evidence on her dining room table. Emails, bank statements, recorded phone calls, background information on Mike. It's impressive when we see it all together. But is it enough? We need something definitive, Jessica says, tapping her pen against the table. Something that proves intent to defraud beyond any doubt. What if we got him to admit it? I suggest. If one of us wore a wire and got him to actually explain his scam? Thomas shakes his head. Too dangerous. This guy could be violent if cornered. We brainstorm for hours before finally coming up with a plan. It's not perfect, but it's the best we can do with our limited resources. Elaine will pose as a wealthy widow looking to invest a significant amount. She'll meet Mike at his office while wearing a recording device. Jessica will be nearby posing as Elaine's driver. I'll be across the street watching the office. Thomas will be parked down the block as backup. Our goal isn't to confront Mike directly. It's to gather enough evidence to force the authorities to take action. Elaine will ask very specific questions designed to get Mike to make explicitly fraudulent claims on record. We spend the next few days preparing. Jessica helps Elaine memorize her questions. I set up the recording equipment, both audio and video. Thomas maps out the area around Mike's office, noting all possible exits. The day before our sting operation, I visit Grandpa again. He's having a good day. He recognizes me immediately and is even sitting up in a chair rather than lying in bed. We play a few rounds of gin rummy, his favorite card game. As I'm getting ready to leave, he suddenly seems more lucid than he has in weeks. You're up to something, he says, giving me a look I recognize from my childhood, the one he used when he knew I was hiding something. What do you mean? I ask, trying to sound innocent. You've got that same look you had before you put green dye in the school swimming pool for St. Patrick's Day, he says, almost smiling. Just be careful, kiddo, whatever it is. I want to tell him everything, about Mike, about our plan, about how we're going to make things right, but I don't want to get his hopes up in case we fail, so I just squeeze his hand and promise I'll be careful. The next morning, I can hardly focus in class. Our operation is scheduled for 2 p.m., which means I'll have to skip my last 2 periods. As soon as lunch break starts, I text the group to confirm everyone is ready, then bike to the strip mall where Mike's office is located. I position myself at the small cafe across the street with a clear view of MP Financial Services. At exactly 1:55, Elaine pulls up in her car with Jessica driving. Elaine looks nervous but determined as she walks to Mike's office, a large purse containing our recording equipment hanging from her shoulder. Through my binoculars, I watch as Mike greets her at the door with an eager smile. They sit down at his desk, and I say a silent prayer that our equipment is working properly. The plan is for Elaine to spend about 30 minutes with Mike, asking all the questions we've prepared. Questions that will either force him to make specific fraudulent claims or admit that his guaranteed returns aren't really guaranteed. Questions about his qualifications, his registration with financial authorities, his previous clients. I check my watch every 2 minutes, barely touching the beverage I ordered. 20 minutes into the meeting, my phone buzzes with a text from Jessica. All good. She's doing great. I relax slightly, taking a sip of my now cold coffee. This might actually work. We might actually get enough evidence to. My thoughts are interrupted by the sight of Mike suddenly standing up at his desk, looking agitated. Through my binoculars, I can see him pointing at something on Elaine's purse. My heart drops. He's spotted our recording device. I immediately text the group, "Abort!" He knows. I watch in horror as Mike moves around his desk toward Elaine, his face twisted in anger. Without thinking, I drop my phone and run across the street toward the office. I hear a car door slam, probably Thomas leaving his lookout position to help too. I burst through the door of MP Financial Services just as Mike is grabbing Elaine's purse. "What the hell is this?" he's shouting, holding up our small camera. "Get away from her!" I yell. Mike whirls around, confused to see a teenager charging into his office. Elaine uses the distraction to snatch back her purse and move toward the door. "You're that kid," Mike says suddenly, recognition dawning on his face. "The one asking about inheritance investments. What is this? Some kind of setup?" Thomas appears in the doorway behind me, slightly out of breath. "Elaine, you okay?" She nods, clutching her purse tightly. Mike looks between the three of us, realization setting in. "You think you can scam me?" he snarls. "I'll sue all of you for harassment." I step forward, trembling but determined. "We know what you did to my grandfather, and to Elaine, and Thomas, and Jessica. We know about your fraud charges in Ohio. We know everything." Mike's face pales slightly, but he quickly recovers. "You don't know anything, and you can't prove anything. Now get out of my office before I call the authorities." "Please do," I say, trying to sound more confident than I feel. I'm sure they'd be very interested in seeing what Elaine recorded before you noticed the camera. It's a bluff. I have no idea if our recording captured anything useful, but Mike doesn't know that. He glares at us, calculating calculating his options. Get out, he says finally, all of you, and delete whatever you recorded, or you'll regret it. Thomas steps forward, his large frame suddenly imposing. Is that a threat? Mike backs up slightly. Just get out. We leave, Elaine still clutching her purse tightly. Once we're safely in Jessica's car, Elaine pulls out the recording equipment with shaking hands. Did we get anything useful? I ask. She shakes her head. I don't know. He noticed the camera pretty early, but the audio might have picked up something. We drive straight to Elaine's house to review the footage. As we watch, my heart sinks. The video shows Mike being careful with his words, never quite crossing the line into explicit fraud. He makes vague promises about returns, but includes just enough disclaimers to give himself legal cover. This isn't enough, Jessica says, voicing what we're all thinking. No prosecutor would take this case based on this footage. I feel like screaming in frustration. We were so close, and now Mike is alerted to what we're doing. He'll probably close up shop and move to another town, ready to scam more vulnerable people. That night, I can barely sleep. All I can think about is Grandpa Frank seated in his room at Sunny Pines, thinking he's lost everything because of his own mistake. I think about how that swindler has faced zero consequences for destroying multiple lives. I think about how the system is failing all of us. The next morning, I wake up with a new plan. It's risky, possibly even stupid, but I'm out of options. I text our anti-scam group to meet me at Elaine's house after school. I have one more idea, I tell them when we're all gathered, but it's kind of crazy. I explain my plan. Instead of trying to get Mike to incriminate himself, we're going to set up our own sting operation. We'll create a fake Gerald Thompson, someone who perfectly matches Mike's ideal victim profile. We'll get him to try to scam Gerald in person, with authorities watching the whole thing. But the authorities already said they won't help, Thomas points out. Not with what we had before, I explain. But if we can get Detective Collins to witness an actual attempted scam in progress, that's different. It takes some convincing, but eventually everyone agrees it's worth trying. The key will be getting Detective Collins on board. Sarah, with her paralegal background, helps me prepare a detailed presentation of all the evidence we've gathered so far. The next day, I return to the police station and ask specifically for Detective Collins. When she sees me, she looks surprised. Back so soon? She asks. I place my folder on her desk. I have more evidence about Michael Peterson, a lot more. For the next hour, I walk her through everything we've discovered, the multiple victims, the pattern of fraud, his previous charges in Ohio. I show her our recordings, limited as they are. I explain how he operates and how he's specifically targeting elderly people. This is impressive work, she admits when I finish. But I still don't see enough here for an arrest. This is the moment I've been waiting for. I lean forward. That's why we need your help. We want to set up a sting operation. Detective Collins raises her eyebrows. Excuse me? I explain our plan. Thomas's 75-year-old father, William, has agreed to pose as our wealthy retiree. He'll meet with Mike while wearing proper police recording equipment. We've already created a solid backstory for him and have been communicating with Mike via email as William Taylor. Absolutely not, Detective Collins says immediately. We don't use civilians in police operations. It's dangerous and potentially illegal. But people like my grandfather are being victimized every day while these swindlers get away with it, I argue. The system isn't working. We need to try something different. We go back and forth for nearly an hour. I can tell she's sympathetic to our cause, but bound by police protocols. Finally, she sighs deeply. Let me run this by my lieutenant. No promises. It's not a yes, but it's not a no either. I leave the station feeling cautiously optimistic. 2 days later, Detective Collins calls me. To my surprise, her lieutenant is interested in our case. Apparently, they've received several more complaints about financial advisors running similar scams in the area. They're willing to consider a modified version of our plan. We meet at the station with the whole team: Elaine, Thomas, Jessica, William, Detective Collins, and her lieutenant, Captain Moreno. Together, we develop a plan that satisfies both police protocols and our desire for justice. William will indeed meet with Mike as a potential investor, but he'll be wired properly by police technicians. Officers Collins and Moreno will be nearby monitoring the conversation. The goal is to get Mike to make explicitly fraudulent claims and accept cash with the promise of guaranteed returns. Enough evidence for an arrest on the spot. We spend the next week preparing. William practices his role as a somewhat confused retiree with a large lump sum to invest. The police tech team sets him up with recording equipment that's practically undetectable. I continue communicating with Mike as William, setting up a meeting for next Monday at 10 a.m. The weekend before the sting, I visit Grandpa Frank. He's having another good day. The nurses tell me he's been eating better and even participating in some group activities. As we sit together watching a baseball game on the small TV in his room, I feel a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, getting justice will help him recover some of what he's lost. Not the money perhaps, but his dignity and peace of mind. Monday morning arrives with perfect weather, clear skies, no chance of rain to interfere with our surveillance equipment. I'm supposed to be in school, but I called in sick. No way am I missing this. I position myself in the same cafe across from Mike's office, just as we planned. I'm not officially part of the police operation, but Detective Collins agreed to let me watch from a distance. Elaine is seated a few tables away, pretending to read a newspaper. Thomas is in his car down the block. Jessica is at work, but constantly texting for updates. At exactly 9:55 a.m., William pulls into the parking lot driving Thomas's sensible Buick, the perfect car for our wealthy retiree persona. He's wearing a button-up shirt, slacks, and a cardigan despite the warm weather. He looks every bit the part of a vulnerable elderly mark. Detective Collins is parked nearby in an unmarked car with Captain Moreno. They'll be listening to everything through William's wire. The plan is to wait until Mike explicitly asks for cash in exchange for fraudulent investment promises, then move in. William enters Mike's office right on time. Through my binoculars, I can see them shaking hands. Mike looks excited. William had mentioned potentially investing $50,000, which would be a huge score for a swindler like him. I sip my coffee nervously, watching the seconds tick by on my watch. Elaine catches my eye from across the cafe and gives me a subtle thumbs up. This has to work. It just has to. After about 15 minutes, I see Detective Collins speaking into her radio. Something's happening. I strain to see through my binoculars. William is pulling an envelope from his jacket, the envelope containing marked bills provided by the authorities. He's handing it to Mike, who's smiling broadly. And then, everything happens at once. Detective Collins and Captain Moreno rush from their car toward the office. Two more officers I hadn't even noticed emerge from a van parked nearby. They converge on MP Financial Services, entering with purpose but without drawing their weapons. I abandon my coffee and run across the street. street, ignoring Elaine calling for me to stay back. I reach the office just as Officers Collins and Moreno are leading a handcuffed Mike outside. William follows, looking shaken but triumphant. What happened? I ask breathlessly. Detective Collins gives me a small smile. We got him, on tape, promising a guaranteed 20% return with no risk, claiming to be a licensed investment advisor, and accepting cash with no proper documentation. It's as clear-cut as fraud gets. I watch as they put Mike in the back of a police car. He catches my eye as they close the door, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. I don't look away. I want him to know exactly who helped bring him down. William comes over and puts his arm around my shoulders. Your grandfather would be proud, he says quietly. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe again. It's not over. There will be statements to give, possibly testimony if the case goes to trial. Mike might even get bail, but we've done what seemed impossible. We've started the process of justice. The next day, I head straight to Sunny Pines after school. I can't wait to tell Grandpa what happened. As I walk to his room, one of the nurses stops me. He's having a really good day today, she tells me with a smile. He was asking for you. I find Grandpa seated in his chair by the window, looking more alert than I've seen him in weeks. When he sees me, his face lights up. There's my boy, he says, holding out his arms for a hug. I embrace him carefully, then pull up a chair next to him. Grandpa, I have something to tell you. I take a deep breath and look Grandpa in the eyes. I can't hold it in any longer. I tell him everything. About finding Mike, about our little vigilante group, about the sting operation we just pulled off, and about Mike getting arrested. Words tumble out of me in a rush, and I probably sound like a crazy person, but I can't stop. We got him, Grandpa. The guy who swindled you. The authorities arrested him yesterday. He's going to face charges. Grandpa just stares at me for a long moment, his faded blue eyes wide with surprise. Then his face crumples, and he starts to cry. Not sad tears, but something else. Relief, maybe? Pride? I'm not sure. I grab his hand and hold it tight. You did what? He finally manages to say. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not after what he did to you. To us. Grandpa shakes his head slowly. You shouldn't have put yourself at risk like that. These people can be dangerous. We were careful, and we had the authorities with us at the end. He squeezes my hand. That's my boy, always fighting for what's right. Then he looks at me seriously. Is it really over? Will we get our money back? That's the part I was dreading. I don't know about the money, Grandpa. Detective Collins said they'll try to get restitution as part of any plea deal or sentencing, but a lot of it might be gone already. His face falls a little, but he nods. At least he can't do it to anyone else. Actually, that's not all, I say, excitement building again. After they arrested Mike, the authorities searched his office and found records of all his victims. There are at least 27 people he swindled in our area alone. The district attorney is talking about making it a bigger case now. Over the next few days, things move surprisingly fast. The local newspaper runs a story about the senior swindler arrest. They don't mention me or our group by name, thank goodness. Just that concerned citizens worked with authorities to catch the perpetrator. Detective Collins calls to tell me that Mike is being charged with multiple counts of fraud, and they found evidence linking him to similar scams in 2 other states. Even better, she tells me that because there are so many victims, they're talking about setting up a victim restitution fund. No guarantees, but there's a chance Grandpa might get at least some of his money back. I visit Grandpa every day that week. The nurses say they've noticed a big change in him since I told him about the arrest. He's eating better, participating in activities, even making friends with some of the other residents. It's like a weight has been lifted off him. One afternoon, I arrive to find him playing cards with an elderly woman named Susan. She smiles warmly at me as Grandpa introduces us. Susan lost her husband last year, Grandpa explains after she leaves to go to her physical therapy session. Nice lady, makes a mean lemon cookie too. I raise my eyebrows at him, and he actually blushes. My 78-year-old grandfather, blushing like a schoolboy. It's the most adorable thing I've ever seen. Just friends, he mutters, but there's a twinkle in his eye I haven't seen in months. 2 weeks later, I stand on the stage at graduation, accepting my diploma as salutatorian. From my spot, I can see Aunt Karen sitting with her husband, looking bored as usual, but next to them is Grandpa Frank, sitting tall in his wheelchair, beaming with pride. Susan is beside him, patting his hand. The sight nearly makes me cry right there on stage. After the ceremony, Grandpa wheels over to me, his eyes wet with tears. Your parents would be so proud, he says, his voice breaking. I know I am. I kneel down to hug him, not caring that my graduation gown is dragging on the ground. I couldn't have done it without you, I whisper. Sure you could have, he says, pulling back to look at me. You're the strongest person I know. That night, we celebrated Aunt Karen's house. It's awkward. She's never really wanted me around, but she's trying, I guess. She even made my favorite chocolate cake. As we're eating dessert, her husband Bill brings up the elephant in the room. So, have you decided about college? He asks, fork halfway to his mouth. Karen mentioned you got into state but weren't sure if you could afford it now. I feel Grandpa tense up beside me. This is still a sore subject. I'm going to community college for the first 2 years, I explain, trying to keep my voice casual. I got that scholarship that covers most of the tuition, and I can keep my job at the grocery store for living expenses. Then I'll transfer to state to finish my degree. That's practical, Bill says, clearly thinking it's anything but. It's smart, Grandpa cuts in sharply. And temporary. Things are looking up on the financial front. He's right about that. Just yesterday, Detective Collins called with news. The DA had managed to freeze some of Mike's assets, including bank accounts in 3 different states. They found almost $200,000 hidden away. It won't be enough to repay all his victims in full, but it's something. And Grandpa's case is one of the strongest, since we have so much documentation. After dinner, Aunt Karen corners me in the kitchen as I'm helping with dishes. I want you to know, she says awkwardly, I'm impressed with what you did. Going after that swindler. It was brave. Coming from her, that's practically a declaration of love. I mumble a thank you, not sure what else to say. And, she continues, staring intently at the plate she's drying, Bill and I have been talking. We'd like to help with your college expenses. Not all of it, but enough to make a difference. If you're willing to accept. I'm so shocked I nearly dropped the glass I'm washing. Aunt Karen has never offered me anything before. Why? I blurt out before I can stop myself. She sighs, putting the plate down. Because it's what your mom would have wanted. And because, well, I haven't always been there for you. Or for Dad. This feels like a chance to make up for some of that. I'm not sure what to say, so I just nod. Thank you. I'll think about it. The next morning, I get a call from Elaine. She's breathless with excitement. Turn on Channel 7 News right now, she practically shouts. I scramble for the remote and flip to the local news. There's a reporter standing outside the county courthouse talking about the senior swindler case. But what makes my jaw drop is seeing Mike being led out in handcuffs, looking disheveled and angry. The reporter explains that Michael Peterson Peterson has been denied bail due to being considered a flight risk after investigators discovered he had purchased plane tickets to leave the country. The camera pans to show District Attorney Patricia Johnson speaking at a podium. This case represents one of the most egregious examples of elder financial abuse we've seen in this county, she's saying. Thanks to the diligent work of our authorities and the courage of citizens willing to come forward, we can confirm that Mr. Peterson was operating a sophisticated scam targeting vulnerable seniors across 3 states. I grab my phone and call Grandpa immediately. Are you watching the news? I ask when he picks up. Susan and I are watching it together, he says, sounding more animated than I've heard him in months. They're really throwing the book at him, aren't they? Looks like it, I say, grinning so hard my face hurts. Over the next few weeks, the case becomes somewhat of a local sensation. More victims come forward, and the charges against Mike keep piling up. Elaine, Thomas, Jessica, William, and I meet for coffee regularly to discuss the latest developments. We've become an unlikely group of friends, bonded by our shared mission. One day in late June, Detective Collins calls with big news. The DA has offered Mike a plea deal, and he's taken it. He'll serve at least 5 years in prison and pay restitution to his victims. It won't be the full amount everyone lost. The math works out to about 60 cents on the dollar, but it's far better than nothing. There's something else, Detective Collins adds. The DA asked if you'd be willing to speak at the sentencing hearing as a representative of the victims. Completely up to you, of course. I think about it for all of 2 seconds. Yes, absolutely. The day of the hearing, I'm a nervous wreck. I've never spoken in court before. Elaine helped me write my statement, and I've practiced it about 100 times, but my hands still shake as I enter the courtroom. I spot Mike seated at the defendant's table, looking smaller somehow in his orange jumpsuit. Our anti-scam group sits together in the gallery. Grandpa insisted on coming too, with Susan beside him holding his hand. Even Aunt Karen and Bill showed up, sitting awkwardly in the back row. When it's my turn to speak, I walk to the podium feeling like my legs might give out. I unfold my prepared statement, then look up and catch Mike's eye. He quickly looks away, but not before I see the shame there. Good. I push my paper aside. I know what I need to say. My grandfather raised me after my parents died when I was 8, I begin, my voice surprisingly steady. He never complained, never made me feel like a burden, even though raising a child in his late 60s couldn't have been easy. He worked his whole life to build security for himself and for me. I look over at Grandpa, who gives me an encouraging nod. When Mr. Peterson stole my grandfather's life savings, he didn't just take money. He took his independence, his self-respect, his sense of security. My grandfather, who had never harmed anyone, who had always helped others, suddenly felt like a fool. He blamed himself. His health declined. He had to move into assisted living because we lost our home. I turned to look directly at Mike, who's staring down at the table. I want Mr. Peterson to know exactly what his victimless crime did to real people. My grandfather had saved money for my college education. He had worked overtime for years to make sure I would have opportunities he never did. Mr. Peterson stole that future from both of us with a single text message. The judge is watching me intently, and I take strength from her attention. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for justice, not just for my grandfather, but for Elaine and Thomas and Jessica and all the other people whose trust was violated. People who worked hard their whole lives only to have their security stolen by someone who saw them as easy targets rather than human beings. I finish my statement and return to my seat, legs shaking so bad I'm surprised I made it. Grandpa reaches over and squeezes my hand, his eyes shining with tears. The judge sentences Mike to 7 years in prison, 2 more than the minimum in his plea agreement, plus restitution to all identified victims. As they lead him away, he glances back at me. I stare right back, not angry anymore, just glad it's over. Outside the courthouse, reporters are waiting. I hang back, letting the DA handle the press conference. Our little group gathers on a bench under a tree, processing what just happened. Well, Elaine says finally, I guess we can disband our little vigilante squad now. Actually, Jessica says thoughtfully, I've been thinking about that. There are a lot more swindlers out there, a lot more vulnerable people being targeted. Thomas nods. What if we turned this into something more formal? A support group for victims of scams, maybe? Or an education program to help seniors avoid getting swindled in the first place? The idea takes root immediately. By the time we leave the courthouse, we've made plans to meet next week to discuss creating a proper organization. Jessica knows someone who can help us file for nonprofit status. Elaine has connections at the senior center who might let us use their space for meetings. 2 months later, our little group has grown into Senior Shields, a community organization dedicated to scam prevention and victim support. We've held workshops at 3 different senior centers, created a hotline for people to report suspicious contacts, and even been featured in the local paper. Grandpa is our most enthusiastic volunteer. He tells his story to anyone who will listen, determined to prevent others from making the same mistake. Susan helps too, making cookies for our meetings and offering a sympathetic ear to new victims who call our hotline. As for me, I started community college classes while working part-time for Senior Shields thanks to a small grant we received. Between that, my grocery store job, and Aunt Karen's surprising help with expenses, I'm managing to stay afloat financially. One evening in late August, I come to visit Grandpa at Sunny Pines, bringing dinner from his favorite deli. I find him seated in the community room with Susan, playing Scrabble. I was just telling Susan, he says as I set out the food. I'm thinking about looking for an apartment again. This place is fine, but I miss having my own space. I freeze in the middle of unwrapping a sandwich. Really? That's great, Grandpa. The restitution money came through yesterday, he explains. It's not everything, but it's enough for a small place and some savings. Maybe even enough to help with your schooling a bit. Don't worry about my schooling, I tell him firmly. I'm figuring it out. He gives me a look. I know you are, but I want to help. That's what family does. After dinner, walking to my car, I feel lighter than I have in months. Grandpa is getting better. The swindler is in prison. We've even managed to create something good out of something terrible with Senior Shields. I think about how different things could have been if I just accepted that these things happen when Grandpa got scammed. If I hadn't gotten angry, if I hadn't decided to fight back. As I drive home in the fading summer light, I make a promise to myself. No matter what happens next, college, career, life, I'll never stop fighting for what's right. Grandpa taught me that, and it's a lesson I'll never forget.